evening and welcome to the first episode of BushCat Diaries. I'm Benjamin. Behind the camera is my friend Clinton, and we will be flying towards Hluhluwe in Hluhluwe Park today. It's a 260-mile trip, and we'll be flying from Petite Airfield, where you saw us unpack, doing the pre-flight next, and yeah, enjoy the trip. And let's quickly do a pre-flight and then we'll get going.
Alrighty.
Okay. Traffic, India Mike 0, holding point runway 0.
Yeehaw!
Alright. Guys, we are with Keith here from Project Rhino, and we're going to do a quick survey with him to one of the local lodges. And yeah, I don't know, Keaton, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the project?
Yeah, so I obviously work for Project Rhino, and we offer aerial, so we are a non-profit organisation, so entirely based on donor funding. And we provide aerial surveillance as part of the law enforcement section of all the private reserves and government reserves on request, as part of the Saving the Rhinos initiative, and looking after and stopping anti-rhino poaching and all wildlife crime in general.
Yeah.
So ZAP Wing, being Zululand Anti-Poaching Wing, provides the aerial platform for which we do a lot of this work from. Most of my work is actually a pretty routine patrol. So like what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be going to one of the local reserves. This particular one's a particularly small property. So we'll go and either do a grid the area, we'll go and fly the fence line, make sure the fence line is fine, and all is all in place and there's no signs of entry and exits. That's a very basic type of patrol. You then do grid searches, which we might look at what the animal population is doing, try with an observer on board. They'll go look for whether it be rhinos. Obviously, being part of Project Rhino, the focus is rhinos, but we deal with all wildlife crime. So we'll react to anything at this time. So the patrols can be quite routine. We operate between 250 feet down to about 50 foot, depending on the operation at the time. Most of the routine patrols are relatively high on that scale, being about 200 foot. We're looking for stuff on the ground, looking for signs of ingress and egress, any signs of poachers, obvious poachers, the unfortunate signs of sometimes having carcasses and seeing that and getting that. Once we are established and we have got one of these kind of things, we call in local units. Project Rhino has also got a canine unit specifically to react to as a ground unit, as in partnership with this.
And you're in communication with them?
And we're in communication through airband radios.
Okay.
And we'll work with the private reserve's own anti-poaching units. So we act as a link from an eye in the sky perspective to go and tie in our canine units, or the canine, all the canine units of the anti-poaching units of the reserves. We tie them all in and act as an aerial observation platform to either get them onto a site,
yes,
or to try and prevent. So if it's an active reaction case, which is when you have a poacher there's signs of a poacher, or a poacher been sighted, or gunshots heard on the reserve, I'd be call out, and then depending on the situation, my role can differ. Sometimes it'll be corralling or providing a barrier, so it won't be an active search role, but it'll be a visual deterrent as a barrier for a poacher not to go beyond that, so we slow their advance so that our guys can move from behind, on the canine units being the trackers, can catch them from behind. We also
so you block them in pretty much.
We block them in, so we slow them down.
Yes.
The biggest advantage an airplane like this has is it's got a suppression factor to it. Once it's airborne and overhead a suspect or potential suspect, they generally don't move. So they tend to stay in their spot, and that gives our ground teams sufficient time to move up ahead. So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to go and do the takeoff roll. We're going to go in, and I'll just go and demonstrate some of the techniques that we use in flight.
Great stuff.
And then I'll demonstrate why we absolutely love the BushCat. And I think it's a fantastic airplane for what we do. And
anything specific that makes it?
You'll see with some of the operation that's, one of the best things, it's a local product. We love to support local. We're a local entity. We support local businesses. For us, a big thing is a local thing. We've also have the factory right here. I mean, factory support is awesome. And there's just great visibility.
You need the vis, especially looking for 100%. Animals and stuff like that.
And then the biggest thing that I've found, being a relatively junior and recent on the job, is how forgiving this airplane is.
Yeah.
We'll go demonstrate some of the stuff that it turns and things like that. And in terms of some of the areas, it'll be the flying becomes the third, fourth thing on your mind. You're operating low level in high winds in amongst power lines, valleys, trees, birds.
Permanent dangerous flying.
All anywhere between 50 and 250 feet AGL.
Yeah.
And you need, you can't be thinking about the flying, and you'll be turning it on its ear and getting tight turns. And you need a forgiving aeroplane, especially when you're learning all this, and it's a bit of information overload.
Yeah.
And you need to put on. It's been a fantastic platform for me to learn this role in this job, just because how forgiving it is.
Yes.
It's incredibly docile. It's got great visibility. But we'll go and demonstrate that we go flying.
You actually turn a lot with your rudders while you fly?
Yeah, so I'm very active on the rudders, and we find that when you're turning in tight operations and things like that, and you'll find when you're over reserve and you'll fly directly over something you want to see, you'll tend to do a quick left-right.
Yes. Get
the space in and then turn back onto target, especially if it happens to be on the wrong side for your own visibility.
Yeah, definitely.
From my point of view, you want everything to be over on the left-hand side, so I can see it with no issues. Once we get into an operational area, we actually drop down the speed to 65 miles an hour to 70 miles an hour.
Okay.
For web patrol. So that's what we want not to flap. For us, we're driving at about 4,000 RPM, 4,100 RPM. So, that's a perfect observation speed. Things aren't moving by too quickly.
And then you're burning very little fuel.
Yeah, so one of the great things is, like, in a normal operation, this airplane will be doing 20 liters an hour, which is substantially lower than most other aircraft.
Yes.
You're certified on Lycoming and continental powered airplanes.
Yes.
you know, but then take it into this, into a patrol environment, with 4,000 RPM, we're burning around about 11 to 12 litres an hour.
Wow.
So, I mean, we take off, you know, this has got 96 litres available, fuel, usable, and we take off with 60. And I call it 3 hours, but in reality it's probably close to 4.5 minute operational speed.
I just said to Clinton on the way here, the countryside is beautiful. You've got a lot of forest areas here.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's a fantastically beautiful part of town, especially when you start flying over some of the reserves.
Yeah.
The reserves closer to Hluhluwe are quite flat.
Yes.
But as you move further north beyond, some of these private reserves are in the mountains, and it becomes quite obvious. It's actually, you know, quite beautiful. It does, however, create quite a challenging environment in some cases when you have, especially when you start having the high winds.
Yeah.
You know, you'll start working in those valleys and winds. You need, you know, you need the climb performance.
Yeah.
And we must remember that the BushCat was originally built around 65 horsepower. So we've gone and put the 912 ULS now 100 horsepower in it. So we've given it a 25% increase in power. You know, even more so, almost 50%.
Absolutely. So it's way overpowered.
So it's for what we, and especially at the weights that we're generally operating at, being relatively light in fuel, one person on board, no baggage, sometimes two people with an observer.
Yeah.
You know, we're operating at pretty high, pretty low weights, so high power to weight ratios.
Yes. And tell me, the observers that you carry, is that specific to each lodge or
each reserve has their own way of life. So generally they'll either meet me at my base at Hluhluwe airfield, or we'll go in some of the reserves have their own airfields or airstrips, bush strips. They're not particularly long, not particularly wide. They're quite rough, and you need a bush airplane that's incredibly capable to do this kind of stuff.
Definitely.
So, you know, we've got the big tires on this. And so you need that kind of clearance, prop clearance, especially with some of the strips can be quite rocky. You want the ground clearance to keep the rocks away from the prop.
These are actual bush strips where
no, these are actual bush strips. They can be quite rough.
Yeah.
They might be quite long in BushCat terms, being 600 meters in some cases.
Yeah.
But they are quite narrow. We'll have a meter of clearance each side of the wing.
Wow.
Felt.
That's exceptional skill going in and out there.
It's a bit of practice, but you know, we fly quite regularly. This airplane flies 30 to 40 hours a month.
Yes.
So, you know, we burn 600 litres pretty much every single month. So we're now over one of these reserves, and you'll start already seeing some of the areas. I've got some towers that are relatively low level. We're not even operating exceptionally low level right now.
Yeah.
I'll go do a bit of a fence line patrol right now. This is a relatively high patrol.
Yes.
We're just looking at the general status of the patrol. But what we'll do later, I'll show you, I'll demonstrate, is some of the work when we start working the valleys. We know that generally the thing about valleys, it provides cover for approaches to come in and out with, you know, because of the actual natural vegetation is generally a lot thicker around those areas of drainage. So, you know, there's lots of natural vegetation. And also we found that, particularly some of your black rhino, obviously occasions where there's quite a lot of trees and bushes. So you kind of have to get low and work into those areas.
Yeah. There's some
so then
buffalo.
So you'll start seeing that'll be buffalo.
Wow.
Yeah, so the buffaloes can look like rhinos when they're from the back end, especially some of the dirt. And what you'll notice, it takes a bit of time. There you see one of the benefits. That's quite not a steep angle of bank, and we're sitting at 70 miles an hour.
Yeah. And see, you took flap. Do you actually fly with the flaps out when you're surveying?
In a patrol configuration, we want to be slow, and we want the added safety factor. So so we fly one notch of flap down, so you take off flap. That gives us a speed, so 4,000 RPM, one notch of flap. Gives us that 65, 70 mile an hour observation speed that we like to work with.
And you had full controllability. I mean, that was
that was an easy one. I wouldn't even. That's, you know, not a big issue.
Yeah.
You know, depending on the temperature today, it's quite warm. Thankfully, the wind's not too bad.
Yes. And I see what you're saying. You mentioned earlier that when you fly, you need to be at a correct height to get detail, but also not too high that you do not see what's going on.
So there's a kind of a scenario where you got to get this best balance. So when you start operating in high versus, you know, when I talk about a high, low altitude is 250 feet, or a low one being 50 foot. 50 foot is a pure detail thing. It is once you know of a site of something and you want to get a closer look at
Specific.
it. It's much more specific. And you're doing a general patrol like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
You'll generally sit at about 150, 250 feet. This is just high enough that you can see that the terrain moves past at a slow enough rate that you can see through the trees and through the bushes.
Yeah.
And then but you're not also can see sufficient detail to determine whether it's a wildebeest, buffalo, rhino, black rhino, white rhino, or an APU unit or a potential poacher.
And are there any problems specifically to the elephants with poaching, or not really?
No, so most of your poaching is split into two. It's either rhino poaching, which is predominantly for horn, and then we'll start doing, then you get meat poaching, which is food poaching. We've got a lot of communities, you know, we look after 300,000 hectares of private reserve, but if you look at the total the circumference of the area, we've got 1 million hectares that we cross. So we go from south of Mpangeni all the way north of Pagola. That's kind of the coverage that we look at. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'm going to show you some of the work that we go at low level. So this is, we're going to drop it down to a medium altitude, and this is working through the valleys. Now you'll start seeing that I'm actually in a valley right now, so I'm sitting at the same altitude as the valleys on the next to it.
Yeah, actually higher than us.
Exactly. So what happens now is the flying of the aeroplane is the last thing on my mind. You have to have a completely benign, docile aeroplane.
You have to be one with the plane.
Yeah, well, you got to have an aeroplane that's comfortable doing it, because you can't be thinking about it. One, my job is to be looking at the ground, looking what animals we're seeing. And two, I could be looking out for power lines, any potential dangers in terms of bird activity, you know, power lines, cell phone towers, you know, rising ground, where the wind's coming from. One of the most important things to do, especially in high wind conditions, is realize where your wind are and you're operating in a valley. You'd start going in and start having to know where the rotors are, where you're going to have your updrafts, where you're going to have your downdrafts.
And this is your average day. You do this every day?
I do. We do 2 patrols a day. So it depends on where we're at, but on average we're doing 2 patrols a day. And you can see here, the outside of the reserve here.
Giraffe as well.
So that's 70 miles an hour.
Sure. You can keep a tight turn on that.
Yeah, if I need to. So that kind of stuff, you know, sometimes you want to do a quick check on it. You might not necessarily aim for the perfect orbit.
These trees that are pushed down here, does this specific area have elephants? Because I've just noticed the trees that
there are elephants in this particular area. So there are, this particular reserve has got elephant.
Wow.
Not very many.
It's amazing how big trees are absolutely nothing to them.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, we're looking at the fever trees, which are quite popular, well, endemic to the Hluhluwe area.
Yes.
You know, are quite tall trees actually, and they're quite empty trees, and compared to your normal acacias and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, this is the environment that I live in. Yeah. This is what we do.
And what brought you to aviation? How did that love start?
Yeah.
Because obviously this is a passion.
This is a passion of mine that's been for a long time. So basically, I'm third generation involved in aviation. So my grandfather was a B-24 navigator during World War II for 31 Squadron, South African Air Force.
Sure.
My dad was a fighter controller in the Air Force. So we've been always involved, but whilst we've always been involved in aviation, I'm actually the first pilot.
That's
yeah.
So your grandfather was involved
but never
you were
actually
the first pilot,
which is quite cool.
That is brilliant.
So you know, we've got you know, I've got that flying heritage. So my first air show was 3 weeks old. I basically grew up at Virginia Airport. When it came to choosing a career,
it was an easy choice.
There was no choice. It was like, no, I want to fly. There was no guessing, nothing. So you know, it was always well, that's what I'm going to do.
I saw before we got in, there's some aftermarket stuff done on this specific BushCat.
So this particular one has got, well, the most obvious one that people will see is the light bar.
Yeah.
Light bar, we do operate from sunrise to sunset, so I'm on call all day.
Yeah.
So we can be on a reaction call right until sunset, and I come back at a particularly light, right at last light. We want as good a light as we can get.
Definitely.
But
because you don't have landing lights at all
at the airfield. We don't have any runway light itself, so we kind of want the best light available on the aircraft.
Yeah.
That's one side. The other side of it is it becomes a visual the whole idea of an aircraft in a visual policing role is that it's a complete mental game as well. There's a mental aspect, a psychological aspect as well.
Yeah.
So when we active over an area, I'll put the light bar on, and for a poacher, it looks like we are actively searching. We are,
yes.
but it becomes a complete visual, psychological element that we are now actively searching.
Yes.
And combined with that, you know, and again, it's saying it's dual purpose.
Yes.
Fitted behind the light bar, you'll see a little siren. And if you look at the cockpit here,
yes.
Right on our center pedestal, we've got a siren here. So the first one is the most obvious one, and that's that we clear runways. Some of our runways are in the reserves, and they are, you know, they will have animals on the runway.
No.
But then again, a psychological element. Overhead a suspect, you want to suppress them.
Yeah.
You know, you want to go and, you know, put the siren on, and again, it'll suppress and hopefully slow them down. You know, as I said, we try and randomize our searches. So it's, you know, ideal for any aeroplane. It's like, yeah, early morning, early afternoon, and late afternoon. That's great. Poachers go, we know about this.
Yeah.
So they go and they get busy during the day. So we'll go and just, especially around your hotspot times, being full moon and end of month, we'll go and have a look. Okay, siren's on. I'll just go and hit the siren on the run. Whilst we may not be a bush strip, I do have a Dacre that lives on the strip.
Yeah.
And also I go and inspect. Obviously our strip's quite good. We have some yellow-billed kites that hang out around here as well.
You're going to chase birds away.
Got to chase everything. I mean, the birds don't react too much to the sound, but they do act through, again, our light, which we can use if we have got one that's being a bit difficult.
Yeah, being out in the bush, you've got animals that can cross the runways. You've got all sorts of things, and you don't want to hit something.
You know, it's not an operation to get hit by something. So, and you must remember that, you know, we have to be 100% safe aircraft, but we can't afford any downtime.
Yeah.
You know, we've got to be operational as much as possible.
And being part of this, you obviously have a passion for animals as well. So,
I mean, I've always enjoyed wildlife. One of my favorite things was to go and do one more inspection of that runway.
Yeah.
Was always, you know, go to game reserves and go to Pilanesberg, which is very close to Joburg.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was kind of the thing that's been part of my family for a long, long time, along with aviation.
Yes.
So, you know, combining effectively two passions has been fantastic. I mean, I think I probably have the best job in the world. I mean, I get to do this all day. I do it real flying. It's proper stick and rudder. Yeah, so we'll come in. Again, this will be an inspection. You can see that Hluhluwe can be quite windy. This is a typical
this is a 90-degree crosswind.
And this is a 90-degree crosswind, so...
Probably 20 knots?
Yeah, I'd say probably 15 there, 15 to 20 knots, somewhere around there.
Oh. That's just something you need to get used to if you want to do this type of flying.
This how you've got to be accustomed to the wind. You've got to become acclimatized to it. I think it's probably the best way. It's not going to go away, and whilst we may limit some controls of wind, depending on what we do, a reaction can happen at any time.
That's the thing. It doesn't ask you how. Well, obviously, certain weather conditions you won't be able to. But
yeah, listen. I mean, to be honest, with the VFR aeroplane. Yeah, there is a VFR aeroplane, so you're not going to fly in cloud.
Yes.
Also, it's pointless. We can't see, which is obviously the primary goal. But in general, yeah, it's very. We have to be able to get used to this kind of conditions. Yeah. Again, the BushCat's got lots of control, so handling these winds, it can actually do pretty well. My left and tail now, so it'll push me onto the runway. There's a bit of turbulence.
Yep. Thank you, Keaton. That was great flying with you and actually learning more about the anti-poaching.
No, and also I think, unfortunately, it's been going on. The peak was, as I mentioned earlier, was 2012, 2011.
Yes.
So people are kind of fatigued out about hearing about the Rhino crisis.
Yeah.
And the reality is that it's still ongoing, and whilst it went through decline, we are, I think at one stage we were like 3 rhinos a day when, nationally.
Yes.
We're now down to 1, but the reality is this, it is picking up again.
Everybody, this is Etienne. He's one of the founding pilots of Project Rhino, or better known as the ZAP wing, Zululand Anti-Poaching Unit. And Keaton is on our right wing here in a formation onto a new project that we're going to land, and then obviously look around for some rhinos. Obviously, details can't be shared with where we are going, as it is quite private. But Etienne, can you tell us a little bit more about the project and what's happening in and around the ZAP wing?
Well, thanks Ben. The Zululand Anti-Poaching Wing was established in 2012 to meet the increase in rhino poaching that started in the early 2000s. It is a regional effort consisting out of various role players, from NGOs to private game reserves and individuals who are all members. And it is, as I said, a regional effort, and the use of aircraft is crucial in supporting the anti-poaching effort, the main focus being on rhino security in our area.
It's difficult to ask, but the success rate is obviously there, correct?
Absolutely. You can never underestimate the value of the aerial asset. We do see ourselves as a force multiplier. For the guys on the ground, having just the knowledge that they've got an aerial asset overhead that can look ahead of them. When you're in the bush, you can only see 10 or 15 meters at times due to the thickness of the vegetation. Having an aircraft overhead, you can see 2-3 kilometers ahead of, let's say, ground units on a follow-up, chasing or following up on armed suspects. It just gives them a much a sense of security, knowing that they've got someone looking out for them in advance and looking at hazards. And yes, you're quite right, to quantify success in any security is very difficult, because the nature of the job is success translates into nothing happened.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to quantify nothing happening. But yes, the reserves all value the necessity of the aircraft, and they do utilize it quite extensively, and not only limited to rhino work per se, but also in all managerial aspects, from monitoring fence lines, looking at alien plant encroachment, values of rivers or dams, pretty much any management application you can think of. The aerial assets are very valuable, and quite correct as well, just from a disruptive presence, just showing show of force on the hotspots or the areas that we have had troubles before, just creates a very, very a positive presence to say that, there's something happening and you are being watched. So that does definitely make a big difference to the stability of the area.
Definitely. And Keaton also mentioned, you guys don't have a fixed rhythm that you fly. It's random times, and they don't know that. So that's absolutely great.
I would say it would appear to be random. There is method in the madness.
Yes.
But yes, we do not fly a routine per se, and you can never predict when and where we're going to be. So that is all done with a structure and a plan in order to best serve our member reserves.
Great stuff. And I know you can't really mention names or anything, but the field where we're heading to now, how does that, is that also obviously one of the areas where you do the anti-poaching?
Yes, correct. So it's one of our member reserves. It's a Big 5 reserve that we look after as well. So the purpose of today will be to fly in, and Keaton will be picking up someone from management, and they will then conduct certain a patrol with a certain set of objectives, and they'll execute that. And at the end of that flight, a report will be generated and circulated back to reserve management, and also for Project Rhino's records as well. That will be kept on file as well, to try and do some sort of analysis on trends or patterns that might be forthcoming.
Yes.
So that we can best utilize the assets as well going forward.
As you mentioned, you're part of this since 2012. It's a long time, and obviously the BushCat Cheetah has been a part of the journey, so that's very, very good to know.
Absolutely, thanks Ben. Yeah, it's great having you guys here. And then also on that note, we've progressed from the original aircraft was a Cheetah, and over the years we've upgraded to the tail dragger BushCat, which we have now. It's served us absolutely flawless over all this time. It's been a magnificent platform, and I do need to make mention of the support that we've had from the factory over the years as well.
Yeah.
They've been extremely good to us, and having a local manufacturer based in country just allows us turnaround time on spares and service and maintenance, and also just the factory know-how as well. It's been absolutely bar none the best experience we've ever had, and we're very grateful for Skyreach and their support as well of this initiative.